so much for coming to this second panel. So before starting, thank you, Tuba, thank you, Maha, and everyone else who helped organize this. Rahila, also a lot of thanks. My name's Rick Latham Lechowick. I'm a researcher at Cambridge. I work at the Global History Lab, which I'm not going to explain because someone else here will. And before I was an academic, I was an aid worker, specifically working with education with refugees and IDPs in conflict areas. So this panel topic, education in exile, education in emergencies more generally, is a passion of mine. So importantly, this panel will be looking at education in exile, whether that be universities or students or researchers. And when we say exile, that we mean it broadly, so both international displacement across borders, but also internal displacement within them. And a lot of times education in exile means improvising under pressure. So creating alternative systems, rebuilding institutions from scratch, finding ways to stay connected to global academic networks, even when physically cut off from them. So today we'll hear from speakers who've worked in, experienced, shaped this reality, whether through leading universities in exile, mentoring displaced students, preserving institutional memory, and rethinking knowledge production itself. We will go alphabetically through the list because this seems the fairest. And each speaker will have about 10 minutes to present. And after everyone has spoken, we'll open up to the floor with some questions. So to begin with, our very first speaker is online. And Victoria Fontan is the provost of the American University of Afghanistan and co-chair of the Alliance for the Education of Women in Afghanistan. Which she co-created as the Shadow Minister of Education for Afghan women and girls. She currently leads the university's operations in exile. Through the Alliance, she works with over 100 organizations to establish quality assurance and peer recognition framework that supports alternative and community-led education across Afghanistan. So may I please hand it over to you, Victoria. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on this panel today. I hope that you can hear me, and I'm going to share my screen just now. Can you hear me properly? I cannot hear. You can't hear me?
Perhaps you might put in the chat.
Okay, let me see what I can.
1 second, we're just having an audio.
We
Okay.
can hear.
You can hear me online?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, so it's not me.
There's our speaker. Yeah. So it looks like it's working for everyone else.
Yeah.
My apologies. This.
No worries.
Maybe you can start with
The next presentation. Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize, Victoria, and everyone. If you don't mind, while we have a tech person come in to fix the speaker system, sounds like everything's working on your side, actually, and people online can hear you. In person here, we can't. So, Aliaksandr, okay. Let me introduce Aliaksandr Kalbaska, Professor Emeritus with the European Humanities University, and acting in various positions, including Dean and Vice Rector. He helped with the relocation of that university 20 years ago. And is currently, I know, building a virtual museum that's very, very amazing, looking back at the last 20 years of EHU and its life and existence in exile. So thank you, Aliaksandr.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here
to present our story not from planetary state ministry, but from inside, from institutional point of view. Your university, which I presented here, now located in Lithuania, but 32 years ago, he was established in Belarus, independent Belarus, and after 12 years of active operating there, he was closed and brutally expelled from our home country. As I told you before, sometimes fate of our university looked like Phoenix, and his first born was in 1992. For the first 12 years, university had a high reputation of one of the best private university. We had in Minsk 9 faculties, around 1,000 students, 100 teachers, 50% of them were foreigners. Growing the university existence and influence in Belarus coincides with strengthening state of ideological control over higher education. An example of this contradiction, the same Minister of Higher Education in April 2004 signed a license to work for the next 5 years, and in July, 2.5 months, a decision to revoke the license and close the university. Formal reason, absence of necessary educational space. Real reason, quotation from Belarusian presidents nowadays and those days, Lukashenko's speech. But there was also an implicit main idea to prepare here in Belarus at the European Humanities University primary and new Belarusian elite that would eventually bring Belarus to the West. University was closed. A university team was faced with need to evacuate itself on the 4-story building over 2 weeks. Distribution among state university among thousands of students and 60,000 books from the library. Each Phoenix fund. 7,000 of administrators, faculty, and staff followed each rector, academician Anatoly Mikhailov, in exile.
Use that as your use the mouse.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm not here. Okay, fine. You got acquainted with this. Now we have to the second stage of our university in between. After the closure and before the opening, it was 2 years where in Lithuania, neighboring EU country, EU International NGO was registered. During the same academic year, under the roof of this NGO, we brought our final year students to diploma, issuing diplomas to them, conducted an admission campaign, awarding academic titles for faculties under the roof of NGO. We didn't have right to do this, but we continued to act as a university under the previous leadership until new programs were registered in Lithuania, in Lithuanian language, BA and MA program. In February 2006, Lithuanian government permitted to establish EHU in exile. EHU Phoenix was reborn a second time. There are some examples of contradictory and successful university development at this stage. 2009, the first bachelor graduation. Erasmus Mundus exchange external cooperation window program was implemented. 2011, PhD in philosophy opened. 2013, Atlantic Council Freedom Award. 2014, EHU teaching reform was difficult but completed. 2015, the Senate of EHU adopted the Charter of Great University Charter. But in 2017, July, Lithuanian Quality Assessment Center indicated discrepancies between EHU actual resources and the minimum requirements that contradicts and quality of education in the Lithuanian Republic. In February 2018, the Lithuanian Ministry of Education and Science issued an order to revoke the permission for research and related activity of EHU. The EHU Phoenix was burning again, but EHU staff did not give up. A proposal for agreement that would allow the Belarusian University in Exile to continue its activity was submitted to the Ministry of Education and Science and Lithuanian Parliament. In February 2018, the Lithuanian President Dalia Grybauskaitė signed amendment to the Lithuanian Law of Science and Research regarding the university Exile. The EHU Phoenix reburned third time. There are some, again, successful example of university development. EHU hosted the 8th International Congress of Researchers of Belarus in Lithuania. 2020, EHU became a part of the Open Society University Network and Global History Lab. 2022, School of Digital Engineering was opened in the 2 years, School of Business and Economics. 2024, last year, we received 7 years accreditation from Lithuanian authorities for the first time through all the university history. Do you think that? Well, not. At the same stage, EHU was demonstratively beaten from all sides. From front, Belarusian authorities continue to follow us outside of the country. Till now, our institution continue to stay in our home country as non-grata institution. Any mention of EHU were prohibited. A bit of recruitment, recruiting new student. The main propaganda's message were and are widespread prostitution and drug addiction among EHU students. Be careful. Every spring spring and summer before the recruitment campaign. Borders and custom control were intensified. Some of EHU students and faculty are under arrested now. Tatiana Kuzina, Marta Rabkova, Mikola Dzadok. Using boxing terminology, hook from left. At the same time, the Russian opposition claimed us as non-Belarusian university because we are not teaching in Belarusian, because we left Belarus, because we had lost touch with our roots, because we lost the blood connections with the homeland. Why would EHU need financial support? That was the reason. In spite of the fact that around 90% of EHU students are Belarusians. Half of them have been engaged in distance learning from Belarus. They continue to remain in Belarus. Such stupid claims that happen. Right hook from Lithuanian. We received claims, sometimes they looked reasonable, sometimes funny, sometimes frightening. EHU being considered as Belarusian ghetto because of weak command of the Lithuanian language. Some rumors spreading around academia. If you together with Mykolas Riomeris University, this is a state law university, it means that you against Vilnius University, implying that the first asylum EHU received in the exile of this Mykolas Riomeris University. In the context of bloody war Russia started in Ukraine, accusation aroused in Lithuania against the entire Belarusian diaspora. Belarusian labeled as Litvinist, those who intend to appropriate Lithuanian capital, Vilnius, for themselves. You can see 2 last inscriptions in the wall of EHU, from bottom in red. The Belarusian university can only be led by a Belarusian. From the top in black, Lithuania for Lithuanians. It was easy to recognize the hand of Belarusian KGB behind this, but it did not make our life easier. Okay. Final trick, undercut. EHU trade union, internal trade union organization activities started 2012 without understanding the explosion situation of EHU, without considering its specific restriction and difficulties, amid a tight budget deficit and limited resources, our trade union started to struggle for control over the university. The real reasons: too wide understanding of the terms freedom and academic self-governance. A lot of demands were proposed to the EHU administration to develop a collective agreement between employees and workers, to stop an announced competition for faculty recruitment, to conclude employment contract with all teachers, to replace 2 members of the EHU governing board, to dismiss the actual rector and 2 vice-rector, to call for a strike. It's a trade union. Public appeals at urban and medium were not supported. Last year, EHU Trade Union 2.0 organized again. Officially, it demonstrated intention to formulate good relationship with the EHU Senate administration, but we shall see what we shall see. My final slide. Please choose the correct answer. Thank you for this. I will escape you to look in 1-minute video. Instead, I address again for yesterday number 4 roundtable presentation. Lorraine, Sophie, Jonathan, Daniel, Emai, and Mary. Do you think till tomorrow morning about common activity for creating EHU virtual museum in Exile? This is my question for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aliaksandr. It's an amazing history. My favorite thing that you said is that we didn't have the right to do it, but we did it anyway. Thank you so much. Do we know if the sound is working?
We're waiting for that, Vince.
Oh,
Maybe if we.
Okay. Thank you so much. So next, may I introduce Marissa Quie, who is an expert in migration, peace, and conflict studies. I'm not going to give a long introduction as requested, but she's a fellow and director of studies, HSPS at Lucy Cavendish, and a college lecturer in politics and director of studies in HSPS at Magdalene College. And I do apologize again right now, Victoria, about the sound issue we're having here. Everything is on our side.
First, a big thank you to Tuba and to Maha for convening the conference. Huge thank you to Tuba for all you do to support the Afghanistan desk and the work that we do. In 2022, the Refugee Hub, the Afghanistan desk at the Refugee Hub at the Center for the Study of Global Human Movement initiated a program to support Afghan women who are undergoing the continuing oppression of gender apartheid. The program began with really modest aims, unlike Monica's program. Teaching English for academic purposes, we hope that that would help the women to tackle IELTS and TOEFL exams and give them access to remote degrees and allow them to continue their education. Over time, our projects expanded to include the mentoring circles that Jonathan talked about yesterday, connecting our cohort of students with Cambridge students and staff. We also have specialist groups for medical students, law students. We've got an architects group that teaches computer-aided design. We just set up tailoring classes as a mechanism for doing business startups in communities. And more recently, we've put an in-house psychologist into our program to deal with expanding mental health needs. In April and May, we ran 3 gender apartheid workshops together with the International Bar Association and the International Criminal Court. It's important to note that the program wasn't conceived as a rescue mission. Conversely, we see it as an act of solidarity. Today's discussion emerges from 3 years of dialogue and observation of our small student cohort. Over the last academic year, we've undertaken in-depth qualitative interviews of women in order to understand how our program has impacted them and to fully grasp their counter stories or something of their counter stories. What stands out most are the unanticipated consequences of the project. In countless ways, our students have taught us about the reclamation and generation of knowledge, the creation of physical, digital, intellectual, and spiritual spaces and the creation of new forms of community. Like Nadera Shalhu-Kevorkian's concept of home front exile for Palestinian girls living under settlement colonialism, Afghan women under the Taliban experience a parallel exile within their homeland. Their bodies are immobilized by patriarchal and militarized violence. They're rendered invisible, even while physically present. The Taliban enforced gender apartheid, a systematic campaign to erase women from the public sphere through legal, spatial, and epistemic violence. Female voices through the law of virtue and vice have been declared arwa, intimate body parts, criminalizing speech, song, and audible prayer. This is epistemicide. As the human rights advocate Sahar Ferhat claims, they reduce us to bare life, biological entities stripped of personhood. And as the sociologist Ortala Nemat notes, they haven't just confined us to our homes, they've made the outside lethal for us to inhabit. Women have become ghosts, presence yet erased from schools, hospitals, and public life. I wanted to talk a little bit about what's happened in the IELTS classes that I teach and the secret life of English. Our remote program for women seems really uninspiring to start with. We focus a lot on vocabulary lists and grammar drills, but something revolutionary, I think, is unfolding. English has become a kind of sanctuary for reclaiming voice, vision, and selfhood. One student captured this perfectly when she said to her mentor, you are my window on the world. Her words reveal English's duality, a practical tool for escape and a psychological lifeline beyond the Taliban's confined walls. This transformation was also evident during an IELTS comprehension lesson that I taught about adventurous sports, looking at river rafting and mountain climbing. Originally, they said to me, it's not understandable why anyone would choose to put themselves in danger. And they thought about rivers that swallowed homes and swallowed cars and mountains that hid war. But then I think a shift occurred. One student dissected rapids navigation and she said, it's like choosing a path through chaos. Another said, they chose the river, we're forced into the rapids daily. And suddenly our English class became a kind of laboratory for resisting, contrasting Taliban enforced instability with voluntary courage. In writing assignments, this resistance expanded. One woman wrote a short story called Invisible Ascent about a woman climbing a steep hill. She wrote, her burqa caught the wind like a sail. At the summit, she removed her veil. No one saw her, but she saw herself. Here, English enabled what's constrained in Dari and Pashto. It documents trauma, it asserts agency, and it reimagines futures under occupation. As one student told me, in Dari, my words are constantly monitored. In English, I now express my heart. Intergenerational knowledge is another thing that we've become aware of. Each generation adds new knowledge to Afghanistan's living archive of resistance. The Taliban can't erase that living archive in matrilineal stories. They can't stop each new generation from adding new chapters to the ongoing narrative of resilience. When our students document their experiences in essays, diaries, digital files, they're not just recording the present, they're preparing lessons for daughters and granddaughters who will one day face their own struggles. Having become a grandmother very recently myself, it's quite an important thing, I think. Moving on, our dance class, we thought, would just be a way to help them to keep fit, because many of them talked about being confined in a small space and not being able to move. Our dance instructor is someone who danced at the Bala Ebog theater in the past. So she takes the traditional Atam dance and they adapt it, and it's a kind of dialogue together for transforming what Afghans traditionally did, but I think it's a kind of kinetic knowledge that's really transformed what happens. The next thing I want to talk about is weaponized knowledge. We still have many medics in our classes. Interestingly, some of them who are in the more repressed areas of Afghanistan, like Helmand and Kandahar, are still able to work. One of the students just told me a story where she wanted to say that knowledge is a kind of Achilles heel for the Taliban. She was working in Helmand. She recounted her story of an encounter with the Taliban commander and his family. She refused to give his children nutritional supplements because she said that they didn't meet the weight requirements. They were not underweight. Also, his wife was clearly suffering from a recent birth and needed medical attention. When she refused, he pressed a gun against her stomach. The commanders, finally, Hamida said to him, "If you kill me, you will not have the knowledge to help your family." So she told us that science ultimately defied ideology. His family needed her knowledge to survive. She said they need our minds. That is their weakness. Our students believe that the Taliban's project of erasure will inevitably falter against the reality of women's expertise. Another area that I think is important to note is the impact of prayer. Women still engage in the 5 ritual prayers a day. They tell us all the time the Taliban cannot control our souls. They control our bodies, but not our souls. And we use prayer as a mechanism for resistance. An Afghan novelist who I really love, called Batul, says, "In Afghanistan, to survive is to resist." And that mechanism is evident in their use of prayer. Finally, we recently used these 3 gender apartheid workshops together with the International Criminal Court and the International Bar Association. We were trying to teach Afghan women about, we wanted to teach them about how to adequately, that's our dance class, sorry. Yeah, so we use this Eyewitness to Atrocities app that looks like a camera on your phone for them to be able to document gender apartheid. It's time-stamped, it's got GPS metadata, and it's very difficult to contest. If the Taliban interact with them and ask what's on your phone, the pictures quickly disappear and they're replaced by pictures of cats or dogs or whatever it is they enjoy. Okay, so, and we're trying to set up a network to teach more women how to use the app and actually what the meaning of the gender apartheid case is. So to conclude, in the ruins of Taliban enforced silence, I think a coming community is emerging, not in geography, but in digital constellations. Afghan women, Cambridge students and staff, and global diasporas are stitching a tapestry of resistance. Knowledge reclamation resurrects voice and cultural memory. Knowledge generation births new narratives, stories weaponized as legal evidence against apartheid. As Banafsha, one of our students, told me, true freedom lies not in what we are, but what we could be. It emerges in spaces like digital classrooms where traditional power structures are suspended. Our small classrooms and our WhatsApp groups are decentralized worlds where pasts are reclaimed and futures forged beyond the Taliban's reach. So this is your call for action against epistemicide and gender apartheid, sorry. Volunteer to be a mentor, support one of our specialist groups, amplify Afghan women's voices not as victims, but as scholars. recognize knowledge reclamation as central to dismantling gender apartheid and become part of this important, small but emerging community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Since I found out about your many programs, I actually volunteered to be that, and it is a very amazing thing. And that when you mentioned the sanctuary for claiming a voice, one of my mentee also said that the hour that we spent together is the hour that she can escape her life because we talk about anything, and you get that feeling. It's an amazing program. But yeah, thank you, Victoria. We have our expert in working with the sound. We might be able to get something going.
Wonderful.
Give us 1 minute. Okay. Okay. Victoria, could you?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Oh no, I apologize. I'm so sorry.
You try again?
Can you try one more time?
Okay. Good
Hey.
afternoon. Is it working?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, this is excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully show you a very short presentation about AUAF as a university in exile. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So it's really a pleasure to be with you today to talk about, I think, unfortunately, a really important topic, but one that is only expanding. And I think that since we started reflecting as AUAF being a university in exile or potentially becoming a university in exile back in 21, now it's become the norm. But in 21, we knew about EHU, we knew about CEU in Vienna, and Param University in Myanmar, but that was the extent of it. And now, of course, our ecosystem has and is continuing to become larger. So as a very short introduction, the American University of Afghanistan was established by a bilateral treaty between Afghanistan and the Republic of Afghanistan and the United States in 2006. It's existed in essence as the higher education arm of American-built liberal peace in Afghanistan, meaning that the programs that we were teaching up until very recently, business, IT, computer science, law, and public administration, were very much geared towards establishing the elite of a society that would become, this capitalist, consumer focused and democracy built society, the epitome of liberal arts in higher education. So that was the purpose of AUAF, and of course, as part of building AUAF, financed by USAID from the start, and then some grants from the Department of Defense, US Department of Defense, and other US-based ministries. The AUAF has very much become, in the eyes of many Afghans, as an arm of American-led occupation, which meant, of course, that it became, which does not justify at all what happened, but it became, in essence, an easy target. It was an easy target over the years. I'll talk about that in a minute. But for the fun fact about AUAF is that today we've got 1,000 students, 80 women. 80% of our students are women studying online from Afghanistan. We just graduated some students in Qatar yesterday, and we will graduate another 80 students in 10 days online. Fun fact about AUAF is that it has the highest percentage of Fulbright scholars in the world, which is 11% of our alumni, in comparison to Harvard, which only has 2%. So this is really a testimony to the success of AUAF. AUAF was attacked in 2016. We lost 15 members of our faculty and staff. We also had 2 faculty members kidnapped for 3.5 years and released in the prelude of the Doha Agreement between the United States and the Taliban as a gesture of goodwill from the Taliban. In here you have a picture of the first graduation that was run after the reopening of AUAF in 2017, and where many of the students that you see here, you see one wheelchair bound, but many others wounded after the attack. And what's I guess that what the AUAF became very resilient very early on, and because of the attack in 2016, AUAF was a precursor of online education. It taught online for 7 months, and that prepared us extremely well for the COVID period. We just went online in a matter of 2 hours instead of scrambling for many weeks, as many other leading universities in the world did. So what the pandemic also helped with, as a AUAF wide, was to prepare us for the aftermath of in 2021, when Kabul fell and our campus was occupied and still is occupied by the Taliban, and we all had to leave. Here I have a picture. This is a picture that I took just before leaving campus. That was on August 14th at night, and we never managed to burn all those files, but we were really trying, and up until the last moment, to secure as much data as possible, as much personal data as possible from Taliban eyes. And all this because, of course, the threat was not just a threat, but there was a reality of physical attack against our community over the years. Here I have this picture of a ship being dismantled off the coast of Pakistan, because after August 15th, what became very interesting is that AUAF had already started to prepare being a university in exile. We were talking to the Qatar government from March 21 onwards. That matched with the hiring of President Bickford, who had worked in Myanmar with Parami University, also at Fulbright University in Vietnam, and already knew very well the university in exile ecosystem. And so as we had prepared through many different scenarios for a potential fall of Kabul, we were ready to become a university in exile. But what we weren't really ready for was all the different interlocutors across the world, well-meaning in wanting to take, we used to call this a scoop of, like an ice cream, give me 2 or 3 Afghan students, I'll do a photo, I'll give them a scholarship, I'll save them for sure. And that was a very good intention. But what this created was a slow dismantling of the university itself. And the university did not seek to survive just for the sake of survival for the administration, the faculty, and the image of the university itself, but it sought to survive really for its students who were still in Afghanistan, and for its mission to educate, to be, in essence, nowadays, the only university in Afghanistan that still educates women online. And again, it's not just a couple of courses here and there, but it is providing a US accredited degree that gives the possibility for its alumni and students to have a choice whether to permeate into the Afghan job market or to study outside and pursue higher education outside should they choose to. And that's an extremely important choice. And being a university still in existence, having our own records, being recognized and having our diplomas recognized as an institution affords that possibility to our students and also to our faculty. So by dismantling the university, which was not the original aim, I totally understand, it not only placed our institution in jeopardy, but also the higher education, co-education ecosystem in Afghanistan, our students and alumni, and also our faculty. I'll give you just one example. One of our faculty members was offered, and again, I won't mention the university, very well-meaning, offered a fellowship, a postdoctoral fellowship. Still is a postdoctoral fellow to this day, paid peanuts, while he was an associate professor at AUAF with more than 15 books under his belt. So that is the type of devastation that existing as a university in exile allows not to occur for an entire ecosystem of institutions, faculty, students, and also within the larger community in the country. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that, but basically we after the events of August 21, my president and I, we just after I reached Paris, I was the last one to leave, airlifted by the French. I reached Paris and he said, okay, what shall we do? Shall we prepare the semester on time? And the first, we identified what was left. What was left was faculty outside of Afghanistan, which we had asked to leave, again anticipating this scenario. Faculty outside of Afghanistan, a very strong online learning system. We had to burn our servers, but we still had Excel sheets of students, and somehow we scrambled and we started the semester on time, and we haven't looked back since. We've had, of course, we've been hit by the ban against tertiary education in December 22. And just as my colleague from EHU said, it's, just because we cannot do it doesn't mean we won't do it. And we continued teaching. We reorganized as well by sending students in different sister universities. Here you've got a picture of the American University of Central Asia. We also sent a cohort of students to the American University of Iraq, Soleimani. And we found that as long as we found that moving students as batches would allow for our community to keep existing in exile outside, but together, again, extremely important. So as long as we had, and this is still the case, a campus ready to host us, a country and government support in order to have visas. Some of our students traveled even without passports, and were given passports, and were given permission by the president of Iraq to actually reach President Barham Saleh to reach Iraq at the time. And as long as we have funding, then we are fine. So those three elements are extremely important. And I think that I'm running out of time, right? Because I see
Please continue.
Right. Yeah, okay. So we consolidated by moving to Qatar with the support of Education City. We moved in 2022. And as we did that, we realized that we had pretty much stabilized as a university in exile. And then we needed to really take care of the education ecosystem that was still teaching women in Afghanistan. And that's when we created the Alliance for the Education of Women in Afghanistan. We now have 110 organizations within this alliance. We are mapping all initiatives that still teach women and girls in Afghanistan. We are, and then we mapped, of course, the issues around education. Number one is accreditation. We've all been let down by and let go of by our respective ministries of education and higher education. We no longer have a proper credentialing system in place. The living certificate, the A-level system is completely out. So we are rebuilding that together as a community. And we are on our way. We are on our way to rebuilding a solid credentialing system with the help of outside partners and recognition of credentialing bodies outside of Afghanistan. This de facto Ministry of Education and Higher Education has established quality standards specifically tailored to the reality of institutions and bodies and community initiatives still teaching women in Afghanistan today. And we hope and we think that the standards that we've established and the system we've put in place is not just going to be of benefit to Afghanistan, but other countries in the world that have been let down by their ministries of higher education. So we think about Burma, we think about essentially all the countries in the travel ban of the United States today. So the journey continues. This is my last slide. Is it game over or not? We don't know. We've been completely defunded by the US government. The entire faculty body has been let go. Our last day of work is the 30th of June, but we are not, we are going to still continue together, rethinking the future. This crisis of the loss of USA this year has been for us as an institution, as a student community, and as an ecosystem in Afghanistan, a lot worse than 21. And somehow now we are faced by Taliban inside and also outside Afghanistan. But we haven't given up yet. And thank you very much for giving me this time.
Thank you. Very much. Thank you also for in knowledge production, global history, oral history, co-editor of The Right to Research, a book that you also released here, historical narratives by refugee and global South researchers. And she is the founder of the Global History Dialogues Project. Please, Marcia.
Thank you so much for this very generous introduction, Rick. And thank you to Tuba and Rick also for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. So as Tuba was mentioning before, today is International Refugee Day. But what we often forget is that International Refugee Day wasn't always International Refugee Day, but it actually started as African Refugee Day in 1975. And it is June 20th because it commemorates the signing of the Organization of African Unity's very own Refugee Declaration, which was on June 20th, 1974. And only since 2001 has International Refugee Day been celebrated as International Refugee Day. So this is not just a fun fact, but also an illustration of the work of global historians, which is to change perspectives on historical events and look beyond the framework of the nation state. So what I'm going to do today is talk about the Global History Lab as one way in which, or one attempt to bring together a global learning community in which to learn and discuss global history from different vantage points together. And I'm really happy that in the room today, we've got lots of people working with us. So Rick, we've got a postdoc at the Global History Lab. Aliaksandr is a long-term partner of the lab. Candy is our heart and soul here at Cambridge. And then we've got Dunya, one of our teaching fellows in the room. And of course, we've got our next speaker, Gerawork, who is a graduate of the program. So we've got many people assembled here today who can also speak to this initiative or this experiment in learning and teaching about global history together. So this was, the slide about African Refugee Day. What are you expecting today? I'm going to briefly talk about the Global History Lab, which is now based here in Cambridge. It was previously based at the University of Princeton, and it's headed by Professor Jeremy Edelman. Then I'm going to be talking about a specific course, the Global History Dialogues project, about one outcome of collective research coming out of this, which is called the Right to Research, and then I will conclude. So first of all, what is the Global History? The Global History Lab emerged out of the idea to create a global classroom in which to discuss global history from multiple perspectives, to learn across different continents in a shared space. And so at first, it basically took shape of a massive open online course, a MOOC. And then we experimented with different other forms, and today we're mainly teaching in hybrid formats where we have a shared online learning platform and we have seminars that meet in presence, in person, at the various partner institutions around the world. We have about 20 partner institutions. Most of them are universities, some of them are NGOs, and they're spread across the different continents. The GHL defines itself today as a platform for learning, skill development, and collaboration in the creation of new narratives across global divides. So back in 2016, I first taught the core course of the Global History Lab, which is Global History 1300 to the present, in Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. And out of this teaching experience, conversation emerged that the students were basically remarking at the textbook which we were using, which was produced in the Global North by a bunch of professors together, the absence of refugee voices as authors of historical accounts. And from that discussion emerged then the idea to come up with a structure within the Global History Lab that would remedy this specific absence. Here we were inspired by working with Michel Roef-Trujillo's thinking about silence in history, which is basically thinking about history as a production of specific narratives, and then thinking about the moments in which voices get silenced in the productions of those narratives. So for historians specifically, these are sources, primary sources, then the archives as institutions that hold primary sources, and historical narratives as in made-up narratives from primary sources and archives, and of course then what he identifies as history in the final instance. So one answer to this then within the Global History Lab that emerged was a course called the Global History Dialogues Project. What does this course do? It basically teaches oral history as a methodology to learners around the world. They can pursue any theme that they're interested in pursuing, any research question that they're interested in pursuing, but they're learning this methodology of oral history in order to collect sources, form their own archives where there's potentially not much access to institutional archives. Because one thing I didn't mention is that a lot of our learners are also from displaced contexts or living in circumstances where they do not have access to quote unquote formal archives. And then we take these learners through the whole process of designing a research project out of the interest in the research topic and the research question, which in the end, it's presented at a global history student conference online, and then also published on this website, globalhistorydialogues.org. So I brought you one example today, which is written by Asrafun Nahar Asha. You can see how on the website in general, our stories are sorted. You can search by theme, by country, by topic. And then you have an abstract. In this case, it's an English abstract. It can be an abstract in any language that the students choose to write their abstract in. We have an embedded translation tool on the website that helps you read in whichever language you would like to read. And then after this, the actual findings, discussion of the findings follow. So here, Asraf is working on Bangladeshi women in the 1970s and draws on interviews with both elite and rural poor women to understand how their lives have changed or remained the same during the Liberation War of 1971. And we can think of this kind of work as layering of archives. Her own research produced an archive of oral histories with the increasingly limited number of women to have lived through the 1970 war as adults, offering an important window onto lived experiences of the war from the margins of its canonical actors and spaces. So then, thinking about having the right to research means not only the ability to inquire into questions of personal or community importance, but also the ability to then be taken seriously by the audience as a producer of knowledge. So then we pursued this question with a couple of students from this course who were interested in taking their research projects even further to publication. And we were then thinking about what does that actually mean if we take those student projects into the form of an academic book. So can scholarship produced by, in this case, these were majority displaced learners, can scholarship produced by refugee and displaced historians living without access to libraries, traditional archives, or universities and their funding structures actually be sort of quote unquote included in the existing corpus of historical scholarship, or is something bigger at stake? That's the central question that we all kind of got together and thought through for the publication of the book, The Right to Research. So those of you without institutional access to it can download it freely from this link. 9 former Global History Dialogues students came together as authors, presented their own research project in this book, and we also all co-wrote the conclusion together, thinking about this paradigm of inclusion. The concept of the right to research itself, we borrowed from Arjun Appadurai, who is defining the right to research in his eponymous essay as, and I quote here, to make disciplined inquiries into those things we need to know but do not know yet. So we should understand the right to research as, and I quote again, a right of a special kind, a fundamental ability then, which is necessarily meaningful for democratic citizenship and decision-making in a globalized world. We wanted to make 2 additions to this thinking about the right to research in Appadurai. The first was an expansion of the right to research in the context of displacement, where we thought it was particularly important to be able to inquire into the world around oneself and analyze what one finds and tell a narrative about the findings. And then a second addition, which is to stress the communicative, interpersonal, and conversational dynamics of research. So on our account, the right to research then is both the ability to systematically inquire into the unknown and the ability to share one's findings and be taken seriously as a producer and bearer of knowledge, something that has historically been denied to many refugee historians. So this means that the burden of realizing this right rests not only with universities and educators responsible for training student researchers, but also, and perhaps more importantly, with the wider scholarly community, which must find ways to make its conversations accessible to researchers who defy entrenched norms of positionality, identity, subject matter, and epistemology. And so by quote unquote accessible, we mean not the limited conventional notion of written for a general audience, but materially, by removing paywalls, prioritizing open access publications, and creating programs for quote unquote non-traditional scholars to freely access libraries and databases. And of course, also dialogically, by expecting and taking seriously interventions that destabilize and challenge existing norms, practices, and assumptions. And I want to just briefly talk about one particular contribution in the book, which is written by Muna Omar. She examines the experiences of women and girl migrants from Eastern Africa to Yemen over the past several decades. And she draws on oral histories with women migrants, Muna, and she traces the journeys of her participants across the Gulf of Aden and demonstrates the harrowing encounters with human trafficking and criminal organizations, the importance of corruption and of international organizations, and the vulnerabilities and challenges that these women face as they are gendered and racialized participants in these migrant structures. So one of Muna's goals in crafting the essay was to preserve the women's voices, meaning the text features long and beautifully translated excerpts from these interviews. This is unconventional for historical scholarship, which often privileges the historical analytical interpretation over the production or reproduction of archival material. Muna's work and the volume as a whole blurs this boundary between archives and analysis, raising in the process questions of representation, of voice, of preservation, and in contexts where traditional archives are wholly inadequate. So Muna's essay illustrates in microcosm one of the problems with inclusion as a model for taking scholarship by and about refugees and displaced persons' experiences seriously. Because inclusion then is very much also a process of disciplining difference. Part of the value of Muna's work is its dual character as an analysis and an archive, a form that challenges disciplinary norms of exposition and argumentation. Yet, to pursue inclusion as we have done required that her work nonetheless bear significant resemblances to quote-unquote traditional historical scholarship. In other words, we accepted some of the exclusionary norms of the discipline in order to participate in it. I did not come here today to present a roadmap for how history should be done or what history could be, which is also why in the title we've got the work. This is very much also in keeping with the spirit of the previous presenters, an experiment, and we're continuously adapting and learning from our experiences and changing the way we do things. I started today with the idea that anyone can be a historian, already a contentious proposition. And then I asked what happens next. There is, of course, no straightforward answer, but a few things are clear. The kinds of inclusion requested by us are partial and flawed, as is the paradigm of inclusion itself. Recurrent in our conversations about this project then was a profound sense of tension, which stemmed from this disjuncture between allowing for and even celebrating difference and seeking to participate in structures and systems and dialogues that are premised on excluding that which is too different. And so just as we must allow for contradictions, paradoxes, and incoherences in the past that we study, we allow for the same kinds in our own experiences of teaching and researching with one another. Realizing a right to research, one that understands us all as actors in and narrators of history, requires more than inclusion. It may require stepping back from attempts to intervene in existing conversations, as we have done before, and instead ask us to start altogether different conversations. The hope of the Global History Dialogues project so far, and the various publications that have come out of it, is that by putting forth models of historical work that both resemble and stretch these disciplinary conventions, we can further conversations about what archives are, who is taken seriously as a creator of historical knowledge, and what the purposes of archives and historical research are in a world driven by enormous and urgent inequalities. And now, if you're curious, I would like to invite you to our student conference, which is happening online next Friday, and it's showcasing this year's student cohorts projects. So you have vastly different topics, and it's much organized like any other conference you've been to. It lasts all day. You're welcome to just join us for a little while, come in, come out, please ask questions, engage. It would be great to see some of you here. Thank you so much for your attention.
Code on there to join. But if you have a look at the CRESH website, if anybody would like to join, it'll have the registration link on there and the links to the Zoom panels.
So if you Google Global History Lab Cambridge, then you'll get to the website, and then under events, you've got this year's conference. There's the whole schedule there, and you can see what the different panels are and then which one you'd like to attend. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to go right ahead to try and keep, because I know in Lebanon, they're feeling a little bit behind also, by introducing our last speaker, Teferra. You'll see on the program, there's no title for his talk because we did not know whether his visa would come through in time for him to get here. It just came in 2 a.m. yesterday morning. Gera is currently a research fellow at Columbia Global Nairobi and the recipient of the 2024 Voltaire Prize. And he's worked for over a decade as an academic tutor, advisor, learning facilitator, teacher at Kakuma Refugee Camp in Kenya. Gera also holds an honorary research fellow status at the University of Exeter. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you could come. And yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much. First, I would like to thank really Dr. Rick for inviting me and Dr. Tuba for facilitating my trip. course, Zach, thank you so much for the communication.
We can hardly hear.
Actually, it is a rare opportunity for my colleagues. I'm lucky that I managed to be here. But for the majority, they have not been getting such type of opportunity. So I'm really grateful for that. To come to my presentation, I'm going to share my experience. It is more of a reflection, not something theoretical. I don't dare to go that place. I'm going to reflect based on the experience that I have had. And the message that I want to leave to you is how researching is challenging within the humanitarian context, how silencing happens, and try to investigate the narrow paths. So I'm going to show you the journeys that I have had.
Possible to switch on the mic?
First, I will try to.
Sorry, is it okay to switch on the? Please, thank you.
Okay, let me try to be loud enough then. Is it okay now?
We have
No?
lots of places here. If you want to just come to the front. There's loads of places here.
Okay, I'll try to be loud as much as possible. I'll try to be loud, but so what I'm going to do first is I'll try to introduce you to the Kakuma refugee camp. Then I'll share why I became a researcher and how that happened. And based on the experience that I have had, ask why we do the research in that context. Then I'll try to show some of the opportunities that have been existing in the camp. And I focus on the challenging part, which is actually silencing part of it, and the way I try to navigate it. Just to introduce Kakuma, Kakuma is located in Kenya at the border of Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Uganda, as you can see there. And there are around 300,000 people who are living there for more than 3.5 decades. It was established in 1992. And there are around 55 schools, more than 100,000 students. We have also around 4 or 5 learning centers that are connected with tertiary level education. In most of the cases, we are connected through agencies, institutions, both government and intergovernmental institutions. And our day-to-day connection is virtual, which actually makes us keep going. Since 2018, after I attended the Global History with Professor Marcia, I've been trying to do some research related to camp life, focusing on temporariness, then camp education, and storytelling and archiving project, the storytelling project, which we intended to do that to create an archive considering the untold stories that are not there outside, and we just have our own way of archiving the reality within the camp. But we have not been lucky as far as we wished. The other project that I'm doing currently is the hospitality related host-guest relationship, how it looks like, especially considering the integration that's happening now. That's a hot issue that I'm trying to do that. The group discussion that you see, this is from in Kenya host community. I'm discussing with the host people and see how the relationship looks like. Now, considering the experience that I have had the last 5 years, what's coming again and again is why I'm doing this research. Where is the information heading? How it has been changing our life. There are full of questions there which are not answered. But sincerely speaking, what I have been doing is I've been supplying knowledge to those who value it, which they are not there. I'm still supplying the systems that discriminate us. So I'm still playing the same game. If you see the problem, as you can see the data, the trend of refugees increasing. If we see the knowledge stocks that are already there, they are there. I try to Google camp education in Kakuma, more than 300,000 informations are there. Those information by themselves are enough to do something for the camp and change lives. But that's not done, that's happening. But we are supplying whatever knowledge, whatever experience. And this objectivize us. So we exist like objects. And our miseries, our hardships, what becomes romanticized and used for the discourses, various forms. So I still asking why I'm doing this one and who is benefiting from it. And even the epistemic appropriation, how it is going on in different, there's only one dominant channel, automatically we feed that one. Even though we get it, we don't know how to use it. The system is not there even to implement. But I'm not denying that there are no opportunities. There are some opportunities there. In terms of access, as I said, education schools are there. Online degree and master's degrees opportunities are there. Some opportunities are coming. But for what? When we investigate the end, still it is blurred. We don't know why we are doing. Also, in terms of resources, we are getting some access, and that's why I'm here. In terms of participation, there are so many refugee-led initiatives, even in the education sector. Some of the centers that provide tertiary level education are facilitated by refugees themselves. So there is a good start, but we don't know where we are heading. That is a question, as Dr. Rick said. Also, we are recognized in one way or another, even though we are very few. I'm the one who is privileged to get one of the prize. But here is a point related to the real ingredient of the research. The things that we produce, is the thing that is unique, or we are echoing the existing knowledge. There are different forms of silencing when we navigate the research ecosystem. One of the silences, I try to frame it in the form of systemic silencing in the humanitarian context, which I'm going to discuss it in a moment, related to representation, domination, and some of them are a bit violent by perversion. I'll come back to it. The other one is regulatory type of silencing, that we want to do something, but regulation make us stuck somewhere. The other and the important thing, which actually I realized it after I started doing this research, is that my position, I'm an insider researcher, and I use the outsider methodology. So me as a subject and object, the position that I have, the intention, all those things are really challenging, especially when you start from the position of victimhood, entitlement, and the issue of this right. It leads us to be violent, and it breeds conflict. And it fits the same system that creates empire as a result of conflict. So these are the challenges that we have been in. Actually, that picture is already there. I don't want to go to there. When we think of the systemic silencing part, especially the silencing by the presentation happens because of agencies. All our lives depends on humanitarian assistance, and there are so many agencies there. They are the ones who take care of us. What does that mean? They do research, they collect information, they try to sustain us. All information that help us raise funding is valid. They use it. All other information that can't help raising fund or contradict their narratives, they become silenced. Now, we always are what? Important during fundraising if we express our challenges. We become more important during writing reports to showcase their image, their good work. For example, Daniel's case yesterday, he's an exceptional guy. I'm really appreciate the way he did in digital economy, but he's an exception. If we take that one as if it is that what Kakuma is, we are not getting the reality. And if we want to bring the other reality, this dominant type of concept, the dominant narratives doesn't allow us to go there. That type of silencing is the one I try to say it, silencing by dominance. I'm sorry, it is hidden in the picture. And this is one good example. If you see, this is from World Economic Forum, and they depicted Kakuma as a place where entrepreneurial things happen. But it's very simple. If you go to Kakuma right now, because of USAID cuts, everything is in shock, as you already presented. The other one is silencing perversion. Sometimes we try, of course, to challenge the existing narrative. In that case, another counter narrative is created to silence us. This doesn't have any objective. It is just a pushback to just take the dominant narrative, which doesn't reflect our reality. The other one that I mentioned is related to regulatory silencing. While I was doing the archiving project, this is the storytelling project, our intention was we were three who did the globalist lab course. and we had the good intention based on what we learned. And we created a team, we applied for a fund, and luckily we got, this was a miracle for us. And we started doing something, but because of the existing formal system, we were not allowed to take that financial system without formal way. So we were forced to have a CBO and to approach a CBO. We approached a CBO. We did an agreement, but the CBO itself is a refugee-led CBO, and they need to partner with another NGO came in. And we need to have the IRB approval based on the research regulation. We needed a PI, an independent PI. We also got that one. Then IRB approval, research permit, camp. When we went through this, almost it took a year. This process forced us to create a new research team. That's not who is energized with curiosity. Rather, it is blended with doubt, suspicion, control, and everything. So the archiving project that we intended to create an organic story, which are not there, diluted, and we came up with a hybrid type of story where the dominant narrative is also part of the stories. So that's why we call it like a structural type of silencing. The mechanics looks like this. And when I have been trying to do the research or writing something, the first thing that comes to my mind is censoring myself. What's going to happen to this one? How it's going to be taken? All these things. So this self-censoring either forces me to suppress some of the things or reconstruct it in such a way that it fits into the global narrative. The side effect of this one is we devalue our experience, or we even lose it, our experience. One of the really touching things that I learned this storytelling project is have that experience, whatever that might be. But we want to tell it, but we can't tell it because so many of the ingredients are missing because the dominant narrative are the one that we feed in and tell in order to get the support. Even the stories that we are in, which we embodied them, our face talk about them, we don't know how to narrate. That is a loss. So this is related to either it is a symbolic violence because of the dominant influence, or because of the epistemic violence. Some of our knowledge are forced to be hidden and learn from the common knowledge, what it's called the global one. So what can I do? I try to read something and to find a way out. The thing that makes sense is what Paulo Ferrari said. He said the silence should not be a curiosity of the researchers for disciplinary purpose, but be the master of inquiry and use research as a means of moving beyond silence into a cost to proclaim their world. It looks very nice, and I really liked it. And I started investigating about which are the worlds that we are talking about. Now, when I think of the world, I am in the community in Kakuma, we are marginalized. We are expecting some meaningful change from somewhere, not from indigenous, but because we are disempowered through the process. We also needed our autonomy. We needed our freedom. We want to thrive and do something. But that system is not there. So the result of bringing out this one is unsettling for us. So it immediately brings what? It immediately brings that motivation of conflict. What is the other world we have? We have a multi-layer humanitarian system, including the local system. The model is care and control. And they need but security and stability. And they also expect us to understand the efforts that they are making. Now, I'm in between as a researcher. As I said, I'm both a subject and object, have both interests. I'm in a heavy position, but I cannot be either of them. I'm limited a bit. And the tension comes from both sides. And now I keep absorbing that tension. So when I see this model and it fits, what I found is two models. One is the Palestinian writer Edward Said's model. He considered the exilic scholars as alienated scholars who usually because of the problems they encounter, they unsettle themselves, they unsettle others. At the end of the day, they come up with what seemed destructive things. The other one is the Hamadi Dabashi's concept of an intellectual who is a comparador type of intellectual who wants the safe haven, and you want to stick to the dominant narrative and have that safe space. But in our context, having that one means romanticizing our hardship, which we don't want it. So where should I be? Practically speaking, I am in both places. I am both insider and outsider. So where should I put? I need to find it some paths. So I'm starting looking that narrow path. I'm not saying that I found it. I'm still investigating. But I'm sure of one thing. I mean, I'm sure of three things. One is silencing, researching are coexisting in our context. The other one is I try to do research for autonomy purposes to bring by agency, but all that regulatory type of silencing, all those things are what removing even the autonomy that I am seeking. Even researching, which is meant for what enlightening us, may not meet that one. The last one is the narrow path. For each case, it is unique. So when it is not clear, so oscillating here and there may be the solution or the option we have, I have at least. Thank you.
Wonderful conclusion. As though, even though I went alphabetically, it seemed like that was a wonderful narrative from Aliaksandr all the way to you, Gera. I know we're a little bit over, but if I could ask the panelists to come up, maybe we have just a few minutes for questions. And if you're still there, which if not, that's also okay, Victoria. Can I open up to for just a couple questions to from anyone or online, which I will now check. Please.
My question was for Marcia. Thank you so much for talking about the global program or the project. My question would be, so I'm a historian, and when I was in the US when the Iraq War happened, and I felt like I was living through a moment when history basically would be rewritten in front of me. So I was seeing something, but I knew very quickly that that is not the history that was going to be recorded. So over the years, that was a while back. So I was an undergraduate a long time ago. The question is, when you say that these women whose stories are obviously very important, are they documenting history, or are we actually documenting archives that historians in the future can use? Because those two are, you'll probably find less resistance from historians if you can have a little bit of nuance in how these things are posited. So if I look at 13th century, we have travelogues, we have archives, we have manuscripts, and manuscripts which were based on other manuscripts, and so on and so forth. So we treat all of those sources quite differently. And I'll tell you why I have a concern about this is because, and I think India was mentioned a little while ago, I think the gentleman is on left, but there is this idea that we are rewriting history. We are erasing lots of things that we know for a fact happened, and we have manuscripts for it, but now we're claiming that that was somehow alien to us, or that was foreign to us, or whatever, however you want to call it, as othering this. So I just wonder, when we talk about these things, is the project actually dealing with that kind of definition making, I suppose, or theory making, where we can say that actually this is history, but it's history for like 20 years down the line, as opposed to right now. So it's a question, I guess, between sociology, anthropology, and history, and how we look at that. Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, why don't you answer that, and then we'll take a group of questions. That's exactly right.
I think that's a brilliant question, because I think it goes right to the heart of what all of this does. So as a background, the students who engage in the second course have also taken the Global History 1300 to the present, where they've spent like a whole course looking at primary sources from different periods in history, different geographic contexts, and asking the kind of questions: who made it, for what purpose, what's about, all of the historical questions of these sources. Then assemble these sources together, have a challenge question, and make their own sort of analytical narrative about or based on these sources, upload these to the website, and then the course participants from all over the world comment on each other's presentations. So they've worked for a whole semester with primary sources from different contexts and time periods, and have learned to ask all of these questions. So that's the kind of background they have when they go into the History Dialogues project, where they then encounter oral history as a methodology. So what we're hoping is that it can be both, to answer your question, right? So that students are creating their own archives because they're recording oral histories, which will be the archive function. But then in the product, which is presented at the website or at the student conference, that this is the analysis of the historian that is based on the primary sources that they have created. Having said that, we're of course aware that there's different ways of writing the narrative of history. And so I think the website can function as both. So we've also written an article for teachers, for instance, how to use the website, where we're saying you can train or you can use an article to do both, to say this is part of an archive, which is the website as a whole as an archive, but also this is part of a scholarly conversation, an intervention in a scholarly dialogue, which is the narrative that the student researcher has analyzed from the primary sources. So it's really an attempt to be doing both, thinking that each one of them is in itself very important, but if we remain in one or the other category, we're not really, so if we remain in the archival category, we're not really interfering into introducing multiple perspectives into dialogue about what is global history, which is the ultimate goal. So that's why it's an attempt to do both.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I know there are a few hands that went up, so maybe I'll collect some questions and yeah, please, Zach.
Thank you, obviously, everyone, for really amazing and critical dialogue. I know both Marissa and Marcia talked in detail about how institutions like the University of Cambridge can show solidarity with researchers and universities in exile. I'd love to invite the other speakers to potentially share any thoughts, findings, or feelings about how universities, research bodies that are powerfully positioned in the global north can show solidarity properly. And also people have already said, if you want to say more in detail about that.
Thank you very much so much. Thank you. Yes, please.
Just to say thanks for the presentations. I think the river analogy really hit home, actually. That was very powerful. My question is a bit of a practical one. So the people that participate in the lessons, in your research, are taking a huge risk by doing activities that contradict the ideology or the regimes they either been part of or have left. And I want to know what processes you have in place to protect persecution of those individuals and their families and friends who may still be under those regimes. I'd be interested to know, for my own work as well, what you organisation have done to protect those individuals.
Thank you. We'll get one more. Victoria, did you hear that question? Or I can, okay, great, super. Is it any other questions? Did I lose hands or I need new glasses? Okay, super. Those two. So if we could start with the first one, or anyone chime in, the question about big universities supporting and showing solidarity, whether with Global South research or other, anyone.
Yes, maybe I can answer because I have a hard stop like just now. So I'm going to answer just that question, and then we are still flying the next plane with Coursera, so I have to hop on a call with them. But on privileged institutions, it's been essential to have the support of Stanford and Arizona State University when we established the alliance. That gave legitimacy to our endeavor, not just within Afghanistan, but also outside, especially with outside credentialing bodies and recognition services. So as far as I'm concerned, this is really how partnership between the global north and the global south can really yield to concrete results, especially, and that's my last point before I leave, especially because in our case, recreating a ministry out of nowhere has also raised a lot of skepticism from different actors. And so what we're saying now is, we've got a critical mass inside Afghanistan. We've got those institutions giving us the benefit of the doubt and ready to put their credibility on the line. So if you are, you can be a skeptic, but if you're going to put some obstacles in our way, please step aside so that we can continue. And it's been a really, I think, successful endeavor from that perspective, and it's going to continue to help us. Thank you very much, and it was great to be with all of you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us and speaking. Other thoughts on that or the second question about the practicality? Yeah, please.
Actually, big universities are resources as they are big to everybody. And we want to use that big or huge potential in terms of knowledge stock, even the brand itself. But I think one thing that we need to think is when we think big, they are big in a certain location. So that's why decentering may be one solution. Let them be as big as possible, but everywhere, so that we see meaningful change. Now they are coming there, but how we are using that opportunity is still under question. Are we using it to stabilize it or to stabilize and share the common thing that we want to have? So I think they need to make it a real better meaningful for the common good, not this. And it's not really one way, even so when we see the knowledge information flow, it is not actually fair. So it can also be seen.
Thoughts about it? Yeah.
So in terms of security, they are taking a risk. They realize they're taking a risk, but they say that life has many parallels with death under gender apartheid, and it's a risk that they choose to take. We advise them to use pseudonyms. We advise them to erase material after classes. We have a network on the ground of NGOs. I worked on the ground for a long time myself, was born in Afghanistan. We use those connections and also connections at the Afghan desk, at the FCDO, who have helped us in a particular case of a woman who was a prominent journalist who had her hand broken. It wasn't connected with the class. It was what her writing about what she felt about gender apartheid. We were able, through the FCDO, to follow up her case in Wardak, to get her released from jail and to help fund medical treatment. Obviously, it's not enough. The other thing is that we've been working on these gender apartheid workshops, and together with the International Bar Association and in particular Baroness Kennedy, we've been given more guidelines on ways to protect them. The International Criminal Court says that they can't protect them on the ground, so we're building knowledge about what we can do.
Could I ask, Aliaksandr, do you have, with being persecuted by a home country, are there pieces in place that your academics or students try to follow?
The relations concerning our institutions and Belarusian authorities lay in the wide spectrum, from permitting to cross the border till the announcing in a few months the issue as extremist organization. A lot of things has happened inside border, inside country, and inside propaganda messages. I have a lot of examples, but we don't have enough time to name and to count all possible threats and problems which had happened through crossing the border inside Belarus and sometimes inside Lithuania.
Thank you. Yes, please.
This is like a naive question, but can we use the education and the history archive or our research to make the intervention, like the invasion of Afghanistan, and then rebuilding the institutions, and then withdrawing from it, and then cutting the subsidies for those, especially the US, for example? Can we make an accountability through the research and the history, and not asking them again to help in supporting and empowering? Yeah. I said this could be naive.
Sorry, who would you like to answer to this?
It's up to you, because I asked about Afghanistan and history. So.
Because for Afghanistan, we see it very much as a bottom-up process. We're meeting with them regularly. They're telling us what they want, what they need, how to change things. I guess we're trying to do what Monica said earlier, to recognize failure and then to drop it and to move forward. We realized that, you know, alliances with the United States and with the UK and others has harmed them. They express that all the time. We're trying to listen to what they want to do going forward.
And how this could help to make, I mean, the US or other institutions accountable for that.
And I think that that's partially a question for you.
I know.
So I'm happy to jump in. I'm not sure that I can do a great job answering this particular question, but I think I'm going to try and get the different questions that were in the room together, because there was a question on solidarity, which might also go in that direction. And I think trying to build a network of partners that involves such different actors with such different settings in terms of what courses required to be able to give credits to students, what the semesters look like all these kind of practical questions of education only works if you let go to a really large extent and let each partner bring the table what they need in terms of when their semester starts, they need the curriculum to look like. So we've moved away from a fairly centralized model where things came out of Princeton and were disseminated to a much more sort of federal way of thinking about things, where in the Global History Lab, we've got a syllabus that offers different readings for different kinds of learners, and each teaching fellow working in each particular location is adapting the syllabus to the way that they think their learners are interested or best placed to learn from it. And this means that even though we're in theory functioning in a way that we all go through these courses within a year, different partners do so at vastly different points in a year. So what I'm trying to say is, in a way, decentralization has been proven a good way forward to bring all these different actors to the project. And in terms of what then can sort of big institutions do, a lot of it is, I would say, transfer material resources. So specifically during the pandemic, a lot of our learners couldn't go to learning centers anymore, for instance, so they needed to have money to buy themselves internet access in the different locations where they found themselves in order to participate in the class. That money needed to come from somewhere. Or institutions who don't have their own teaching fellows to teach the class, they need to be funded. The teaching fellow needs to be funded from somewhere. So in that way, the role of those universities that have access to more material resources in the network than others put that money in order to facilitate the project as a whole to continue. And then in terms of the protection question, I would also say that's always one that's with us, and it's vastly dependent on the circumstances and the countries in which student researchers are placed. But in general, we also very much depend on the local partners to make the call of what in this country is a research project that cannot go forward. For instance, when we were still working with students in Rwanda, we're not working there anymore because that was one context in which our partner had very strict regulations for what could be researched and what couldn't be researched, which went against student interests constantly. And so that was one limitation, right? In some countries, you then cannot do this kind of a project. In general, though, we try to precisely not set topics for students, so that that's really something that they can to pursue whichever project they are interested in pursuing, finding, of course, the fact that we're guiding them towards questions that they can answer based on the methodology we've been teaching in the context in which they are placed.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to end it here. So I really want to say a huge thank you to Marissa, Marcia, Gera, Aliaksandr, and Victoria, who's not here anymore. Thank you so much for all. Thank you. I believe lunch is probably not here yet. So just think about it and have some coffee while you wait. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again.